Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating, and air restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com. And by the Conrad Trebas Foundation, Darlene Marcos Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
With San Diego's Migrant Welcome Center set to close tomorrow, the question is, what will happen to the people it serves? Thank you for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. Leaders in communities that received many of those migrants before are trying to find out. KPBS North County reporter Jacob Ayer says they still have more questions than they have answers.
It's been just under a week since SBCS, the organization running the Migrant Welcome Center, said it was closing down. That decision's making some people nervous, especially those who led the efforts to serve the migrants before the center opened back in October, like Salvador Roman with the city of Oceanside.
It's definitely gave me a little bit of a heartburn. I think that there's a lot of effort and it took a toll on all the resources and all the providers that were out there.
The Oceanside Transit Center was one of the sites where Customs and Border Protection dropped off migrants.
Sometimes we'd get 50, sometimes we get close to 200, but it would average around 100 a day. Last fall was nonstop, every day, Monday through Sunday, no breaks, no time off.
Roman says CBP had a meeting with local leaders on Tuesday and told them it's possible the transit center drop-offs could start again. Last fall, nonprofit organizations stepped up to help.
Just the idea of having to rely on them again and hoping that they respond is my biggest concern, because it was a lot. It took a lot out of them. It took a lot out of our community. And there's already a need for resources within our residents. So having to respond would be I think a huge setback for us.
The North County LGBTQ Resource Center was one of the nonprofits that provided resources for migrants at the Oceanside Transit Center last fall.
It was intense because also it was hard to communicate with Border Patrol, understanding exactly how many people and where and when they were going to drop people.
Executive Director Max Disposti says his organization can't help to the same degree.
We're definitely going to evaluate what we can do, but it cannot be anything close to what we did months ago.
Interfaith Community Services was another leader in the North County effort. They declined an interview, but in a written statement said their resources were stretched thin before, and as the number of migrants increase, they cannot meet the needs. Rowan says they're preparing a rapid response network within North County ahead of the Migrant Welcome Center closure. Customs and Border Protection did not respond to our request for comment. Jacob Ayer, KPBS News.
National city leaders are considering an ordinance that would protect renters who have been impacted by the floods. The county has approved a 60-day eviction moratorium in hard-hit areas, including National City. Councilmember Jose Rodriguez hopes to add more protection after that.
So we want to make sure that tenants have the peace of mind that they're going to be able to come back, and we can have a local ordinance in place to assure that they have an opportunity to come back even after the next 30 days.
And the proposal includes assistance with relocation, a stoppage of rent hikes, and tenants' rights to return to homes that they lost due to the recent flooding.
I'm Ariella Scalise, and coming up tonight, could see some areas of fog, but we are starting a drier pattern here and gradually a little bit of a warmer pattern before cooler conditions and even some more precip could return. We'll show you when. That's coming up.
Despite a narrow path to the nomination, Republican candidate Nikki Haley is vowing to stay in the 2024 presidential race. Haley's renewing her pledge to keep fighting as voters in her home state of South Carolina prepare to go to the polls on Saturday. Julie Benbrook reports.
Former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley is pushing against calls for her to drop out, vowing to continue beyond her home state's primary on Saturday and through Super Tuesday on March 5th.
I'm campaigning every day until the last person votes.
Former President Donald Trump has won every primary and caucus so far, making many question the path forward for Haley's campaign.
I've never taken the easy route. I've been the underdog in every race I've ever run.
Haley made her case for staying in the race at an event Tuesday, pointing to a number of factors, including her view that some politicians who embrace Trump publicly, privately dread him.
They know what a disaster he's been and will continue to be for our party. They're just too afraid to say it out loud. Well, I'm not afraid to say the hard truths out loud. I feel no need to kiss the ring.
Recent polling shows Trump with a significant lead in the Palmetto State. 65% of likely voters said they plan to support the former president, and nearly 30% said they plan to support Haley, boosting Trump's already confident campaign ahead of Saturday's primary.
She's not working. She's here. She's down by 30, 35 points. And everybody knows her. You're not supposed to lose your home state.
Reporting in Washington, I'm Julia Benbrook.
California's 80th Assembly District occupies the southwestern part of San Diego County and the nation itself. It's home to National City, Chula Vista, and Imperial Beach. KPBS reporter Tom Fudge tells us about the primary election where a Democratic incumbent faces a Republican with a military background.
The 80th Assembly District is heavily Latino and heavily Democratic. Democrats comprise 47% of registered voters in the 80th District, while Republicans are only 21%, according to the latest stats from the California Secretary of State's office. The incumbent Democrat is David Alvarez, a lifelong San Diego resident and former San Diego City Council member. On California's housing shortage, he says he has sponsored bills to make it easier to build affordable housing, and we need to do more to pave the way to affordability in all communities.
We are putting forward some proposals to make sure that housing gets built everywhere and that it's facilitated everywhere, so that those roadblocks that cities often put up because they don't want to allow things like affordable housing in their own cities will no longer be impediments to building housing. We also need to fund programs that help subsidize housing.
Alvarez's challenger, Republican Michael Williams, spent most of his career in the Navy working in intelligence. He says the private sector needs to be given more freedom to respond to high demand for housing. And though not everyone will choose to live in pricey San Diego, financial incentives to meet demand will mean that home builders will fill many of the gaps in our supply.
It may mean that they're using containers stacked on each other, as we've seen in some of the European cities. It may be the tiny homes that are being sold as a future solution to housing shortages. All of those are options that can be used to house our people.
For more information on the candidates and other primary elections, check out the Voter Hub at kpbs.org. Thomas Fudge, KPBS News.
This week, KPBS gathered 15 community leaders from across the South Bay at the San Ysidro Library. Reporter Katie Heisen heard what's at top of mind as the election approaches.
Everyone in the room agrees. They knew the floods would happen. They'd reported the storm drains for decades, they say, and were ignored by local government. It was just a matter of time. News publisher Fannie Miller says the Latino community often bears neglect in silence. But with the waters rose an anger she rarely sees.
And I'm really happy that they're pissed off, because when something like that, it affects you, that's how people get involved.
She hopes that anger will drive people to the polls. But those most affected, low-income people of color, face added barriers to voting. Miller says first or second generation immigrants often don't understand the systems here. They don't know who to hold responsible for what happened or how. API initiative leader Joanne Fields says for many, including Filipino, Vietnamese, and Chinese residents, most public information isn't available in their primary language.
While it may not be visible right away that we're in the community, we're there, but we don't come out. And we're not hard to reach, we're hardly reached.
And the flood just compounded these issues, says retired educator Norma Cáceres.
Trying to make voting a priority is going to be very difficult, if not impossible, because they are on survival mode. And, it's what do we need to do to get to the next day?
They say it's crucial to overcome these barriers, but it's hard to see how, with less than 2 weeks left to vote. Katie Heisen, KPBS News.
And to learn more about all of the candidates and their positions on other issues, visit our Voter Hub online at kpbs.org/voterhub. Homelessness in the U.S. is shooting up higher than ever before and at a quicker rate. California is home to 12% of the country's population and a third of its homeless population. Jake Tapper met up with Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass to discuss her effort to bring those who are unhoused off of the streets.
This is the sound of someone's entire life essentially being thrown in the trash. In the middle of recent record-breaking rain in Los Angeles, the city is today clearing an encampment for unhoused people. Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass campaigned on fixing the city's homeless crisis. This is, theoretically, part of that fix.
This is exactly why I ran for mayor. This is the reason why.
Mayor Bass took me to see the cleanup firsthand, getting people out of tents and onto buses and into temporary housing. They leave behind anything they cannot carry.
I was recently stabbed about 2 weeks ago. This is like a godsend right now, like getting indoors and being away from this.
Inside Safe is the name of Mayor Bass's flagship program to tear down these encampments and bring LA's unhoused indoors.
So when I spoke to you about a year ago, you talked about your goal for homelessness and the end of homelessness in Los Angeles by the end of your first term.
Well, I think the progress is going well. We destroyed the myth that people do not want to leave the tents. People don't want to leave the cars and their RVs. We've had the opposite problem. We have more people willing to leave than we have rooms for.
In a remarkable new study, researchers at the University of California, San Francisco surveyed thousands of the homeless in California. Nearly 90% of participants said high housing costs were a barrier to their moving into permanent housing. And the majority of those surveyed did want to get off the streets.
There are people on the street that don't want to be housed, but most of them do, It's just finding the right housing for them in the right situation.
Major factors to finding housing are high rents and low income. Then, of course, there's also discrimination and bad credit. Some people don't even have ID. Some have been evicted before. Many are dealing with addiction or struggling with physical or mental health problems.
Affordability is definitely the issue, but the shredding of the social safety net over years has resulted in this situation that we have here. So we have to repair that while we repair the human beings that suffer because of it.
The number of people experiencing homelessness in a single night went up 12% in the United States in 2023, in part because COVID programs preventing evictions and housing losses came to an end. A quarter of those people were unhoused for the first time in their lives.
How many people fell into homelessness during COVID?
Before COVID, there were probably about 20 or 30,000 people. Now it's 46,000.
Today, this man, Mark, the father of 4, is getting out of his tent and into temporary housing nearby.
I want to get a house to do better for myself and get back in my kid's life.
What do you want people out there watching to know about the unhoused community?
We're not all drug addicts. We're not all thieves. We're not all people trying to hurt and steal from you. If you see a person down, I think as a human being, it'd be a great thing to turn around and a bottle of water, maybe a blanket, something. You could save their life.
Mark's new housing is in these former shipping containers, used to build interim housing quickly.
Thank you. Thank you.
Since the launch of Inside Safe, more than 2,000 people have moved into interim housing, but only 329 have moved into permanent housing. Since Mayor Bass took office, the program has cost LA more than $53 million, but the city argues it was well spent and points out the fire department spent nearly $125 million on incidents involving unhoused people last year.
There is a misunderstanding about homelessness in this country.
Exactly.
A lot of people think it's just people with psychological problems or just people with addiction.
We have about 9,000 children who are homeless in Los Angeles. Some of them are in and out of school, some of them attend school, but many are living in cars and RVs. One of the fastest growing sectors of the unhoused population are senior citizens, people in their 60s and 70s. They get priced out of the market and they wind up unhoused.
Even so, California is trying to tackle mental health and substance abuse by implementing care courts to push those who need it off the streets and into treatment.
And this is a controversial opinion. I don't think it's okay to be profoundly mentally ill, walking in and out of traffic, and be allowed to be there. I think some people might need to be hospitalized, and they might need to be hospitalized against their will. And I think it is inhumane to allow people to die on the streets.
The short-term solution, get people out of the tents, off the street, out of the cars, into these containers. But this isn't a long-term solution for the problem.
No,
right?
but let me just tell you what short-term is. I think short-term is about 1.5 years. And I say that because it takes a while to build housing. Unfortunately, the policy de facto had been, you stay on the street while we build something. I think that is completely unacceptable. So what is the solution? Just putting somebody in a house is not enough. There needs to be health care and other social services support, and then they need to go into permanent housing.
President Biden has canceled another $1.2 billion of student loan debt. It impacts nearly 153,000 borrowers enrolled in a federal loan repayment plan the administration launched in August. The Saving on a Valuable Education plan erases remaining balances for those who originally borrowed $12,000 or less and have made payments for at least 10 years. Since taking office, Biden has canceled nearly $138 billion of federal student loan debt for nearly 4 million borrowers. Air travel is flying high in 2024. The upcoming spring break season will be no exception to that. But sold-out flights to some destinations may surprise passengers. Karen Kaifa explains why some cities are eclipsing others when it comes to spring travel.
Americans are ready for spring and a break.
People are ready to take advantage of school closures and get out of cold climates and go find some warmth.
In addition to sun and fun, Christy Hudson of Expedia says they've found different destinations trending for spring 2024.
Not only are people headed to the kind of typical spring break destinations, but there's also a major event happening during the spring break window.
A total solar eclipse is set to cross North America on April 8th, and U.S. cities within the path of totality like Dallas, Indianapolis, even Cleveland expect a boost during a busy time.
That is the busiest and priciest time to fly during the spring season. You can get better rates by flying at the very beginning of March or the very end of April.
Going.com travel expert Katie Nastro also recommends flexibility since breaks and demand vary.
So say, for example, your children's spring break is end of March, but a city sort of nearby, an airport that you could sort of fly out of, their school schedule is, say, a week or two later. You can actually sort of use that to your advantage.
Nasser also says to look for best fares now.
You want to just make sure you're doing yourself a favor and just circling 21 days out from when you're looking to fly as your absolute book buy date.
And price out an itinerary with 2 one-way fares, maybe even on different airlines or to different nearby airports to see if it's cheaper than a round trip. In Washington, I'm Karen Kaifa.
Water conservation efforts in the western U.S. appear to be doing some good. The water level at Lake Mead is on the rise, which is important because millions of people depend on that water supply. Jacqueline Schultz reports.
Doesn't look familiar at all anymore. Old Glory isn't waving in the wind anymore.
Millions of people tune into the Sin City Outdoors YouTube channel, created by father and son duo Adrian Montero Sr. and Jr. They've attracted quite the following by giving video tours of Lake Mead.
It's bow up. Oh my gosh.
And those abandoned boats. There is a boat down there if you look closely.
It's not. Oh my gosh. You're stuck and they're stuck.
It's this same upright vessel that captured national attention as the eyes of the country watched Lake Mead's levels shrink. Summer 2022, it hit a historic low of 1,040 feet. This week, it's now 35 feet higher.
It's really great to see Lake Mead on the mend. What it tells me is the conservation efforts are really working.
Professor Andrea Gerlach heads the Udall Center at the University of Arizona, working to help government and scientists collaborate to manage the Colorado River system. She says Lake Mead is on the mend only because of the water cuts approved by the feds last fall. Arizona, Nevada, and California agreed to cut back use by 3 million acre-feet through 2026. That equates to 977 billion gallons of water.
Every drop counts. Every little system conservation, any little effort, it adds up.
Our previous wet winter helped tremendously, but there will be no telling for months whether this winter will even help. Colorado climatologist Becky Bollinger of the Colorado Climate Center explains.
We need about 10 of those years to completely solve the Lake Mead and Lake Powell issues. And so that's definitely not going to happen. 92% of the water comes from the upper basin. This year so far doing okay. We're never going to get Lake Mead back to where it was.
Scientists forecast the Southwest will get hotter and drier in coming decades, so the only surefire way to preserve our lake levels is more conservation.
What we're missing is a long-term solution. Our behavior has an absolute direct impact on what those lake levels look like.
A proposal to create a fund to repair the City of San Diego's stormwater infrastructure moved forward today. The City Council's Rules Committee unanimously passed the proposal. The money would come from a special parcel tax and go toward upgrading infrastructure and disaster response. Council President Elo Rivera presented the proposal following last month's storm. 1,000 people were forced out of their homes along Choyas Creek due to the flooding. As people continue to rebuild, there is still concern of future storms.
The rains that are coming are not going to stop. They're not going to be easy on us.
Unfortunately, January 22nd was not an isolated event, but a recurring problem.
And the rate for the tax as well as exemptions have not been decided. The next steps would be to get input from the public and committee before it goes back to the Rules Committee and then the full council for a vote. Now, if approved, it will be put on the November ballot.
And let's take a look at our weather headlines. Nice to see the drier weather making a comeback. That continues as we head into the weekend. As we dry out, we also warm up, especially throughout our Thursday and Friday. But I do think it'll turn a little bit cooler by the weekend. And then we'll start to see a chance of precip returning as early as next week. Looking at what we can expect tonight, San Diego down to 50, Oceanside 49, Chula Vista down to 49, Borrego Springs 45, and Mount Laguna could still see a little bit in the way of some precip moving on through down to 31. Sunshine on the way, though, as we head into the day tomorrow, bringing Borrego Springs up to 72, Mount Laguna 42, San Diego, you'll be at 65. At Oceanside, you'll see temperatures into the mid-60s. Looking at a nice pattern change here through the end of our week as we see this ridge of high pressure developing and strengthening, bringing us dry conditions and bringing us some more comfortable temperatures as we'll see things gradually come on up. So still 65 with some areas of fog as we start tomorrow morning. We could see a little bit of foggy start to Friday as well, but look at that, back to 72 by the afternoon along the coast. The weekend will turn a little bit cooler as we start to see more clouds increase by Sunday and a shower or two possible as we head into the day on Monday. Looking at the next 5 days further inland as things are getting warmer. Look at Friday afternoon. We're back to 75 degrees, and then we'll briefly cool down again as we head into the weekend. Highs in the upper 60s, low 70s, and then a shower or two possible again as we start next week. Temperatures only into the lower 60s. We look into the mountains for you where we'll have chilly sunshine on the way for our Thursday, a high of 42, and then we'll gradually see temperatures come up a bit as we head into Friday and Saturday. Highs back into the upper 40s, and then we'll see chillier conditions with some more clouds and the wind picking up as we head into early next week. We'll wrap things up for you into the desert where nice weather on the way for our Thursday. Plenty of sunshine, 72, and then temperatures back into the mid-70s as we head into Friday and Saturday. Looking into next week, we'll have a little bit more cloud coverage moving back in by Monday. For KPBS News, I'm Ariella Scalise.
A one-of-a-kind veteran residential and rehabilitation center is marking 10 years in San Diego. KPBS military and veterans reporter Andrew Dyer has more.
John Cubbage was a Navy chief, a job that comes with a lot of responsibility. Today, at the VA's Aspire Center in Old Town, he says when he left the service after 14 years, post-traumatic stress disorder derailed his life.
Cost me my marriage, my family, my freedom, you name it, and I lost it because of my PTSD.
A year ago, he says he was close to becoming a statistic, another victim of veteran suicide. That's when he sought help at the VA in his native Philadelphia. That started him on the road to San Diego and the Aspire Center. It's a residential facility for post-9/11 veterans living with PTSD. They receive counseling, therapy, and training needed to find homes and jobs. Center Director Carl Remley says it's the only such facility in the nation.
I've developed and led programs for the VA for over 3 decades, and I've not encountered one program that was purpose-built to this extent, to give you veterans a sense of home. Almost 1,000 veterans have been through the center's program since it opened in 2014. Upon graduating, veterans not only have the benefit of stability, but often have also improved their credit. And because veterans can be referred to the program via veterans courts, they've also had any legal issues expunged. Cubbage says it's turned his life around.
It's very hard in this life to get a brand new, fresh start, especially when a lot of us have seen rock bottom. But that's what they do here.
He says living in San Diego at Aspire has inspired him to plant roots here.
I loved it so much that after my time here is finished, I'm going to stay in the area and go back to school, believe it or not, and probably stay out here for the rest of my life.
The VA says veterans who complete the program have employment and educational placement rates of 100%, and all of them are discharged into stable housing. Andrew Dyer, KPBS News.
And here's a look at what we're working on for tomorrow in the KPBS newsroom. NPR's Morning Edition is discussing a private company's attempt to land on the moon. It would be the first U.S. landing in decades. And KPBS Midday Edition has the weekend preview of arts and culture events, including a dinner where bugs are on the menu. Yum. And you can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org. Thanks for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. Good night.
Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating, and air restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marcos Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.